Hi everybody, I'm Akshat. I'm the founder of Metaforms, and with me is Katrina today. Hello, good to have you with us.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you've been a great leader in sort of specifically the data quality space in market research. So we were very glad to have you on the podcast. Just to give you a quick intro, Metaforms is a research operations automation company, and we help survey programming for agencies that currently do it manually. That's sort of something about Metaforms. I'd love to hear a lot about you in terms of the business today and what you like to focus on within market research. I understand today No operates a lot in the qual market research space, but if you could go a little bit deeper, that would be great for our audience.
Yeah, of course. I wear a few hats in the insights industry. President of No Research, full service qualitative agency. And yes, we are about 85% qualitative. So mostly qualitative all the time. My other hat is co-founder of Scoot Insights. And we're still in the qualitative space, but more of a facilitation space to help stakeholder teams all get going in the same direction, aligned on their objectives together. So there's sort of complementary offerings. So basically those are my spaces. I've also have been getting very passionate around data quality. I was part of the initial data integrity initiative task force at the Insights Association, which I think has another name now, but we did the first version of the toolkit a couple years ago, really to start the conversation and get people thinking about data quality. For me, it's very important that qualitative has a role and a space there, because I think a lot of people, when they think of data quality, they think of quantitative data and they think of cleaning Excel spreadsheets. And we work with humans, so it's a little harder for us. So we tend to be at more of the bottom of the funnel, and our data quality encounters tend to be with real people in real time, which makes it very tricky for me and my team. So I have been on pursuit of a system at both entities to make sure that we're not making subjective decisions about quality, and they're happening as little in the moment, person to person as possible.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Awesome. So just to go into the depth of how No Research operates today, can you talk a little bit about how do you ensure that No Research has great output when it comes to data quality specifically?
And for this conversation, are we talking about data quality from the insights perspective or from the participants?
Both. So we can actually begin first with participant quality and how we
Okay.
make sure that the participants are truly who they claim they are. And second, ultimately, when the research is completed, how do we really make sure that it also is graded really well?
Because the reason for the separation, I think, is one is required for the other, right? You have to have good participant sources to have good data, but there are also a number of other things involved in deliverable quality over and above participant quality, right? So participant quality is one essential piece, but ultimately there's a lot more factors when you get to quality of the actual output. So from a participant standpoint, we started our participant integrity initiative internally. It was 2020, and it was in the whole profusion of the survey farms and the fraudulent participants that just exploded all over everybody's project. And we were finding them everywhere. We were finding them regardless of source. We do recruiting on social. We use client lists. We use regular qual databases. We do opt-ins from surveys. We do widgets on websites. And every way we recruited, it was happening. So it didn't seem to be a channel issue so much. So that was kind of our first learning, is that it's exploding and it's not channel dependent. And we were at I'll admit it, we got to a 19% people who weren't who they said they were ending up into the research at this like crucial point at the end of 2020. And we just stopped all the presses and we thought we had to then replace those people. It's not like our clients were getting 19% less, but we were doing a lot of rescheduling and rebooking and rescreening to make sure that we were delivering. So we put a number of different processes in place. I think the most important one is a fraud check-in, like having part of a kickoff meeting with our suppliers and our client partners to say, how could it happen in this project? Let's get up in front of it. Let's think of all the ways in which something could be compromised to make sure that we're putting things in place to prevent it. For instance, when we use lists of subscribers, not for our team not to assume the brand's already checked them. They're definitely subscribers, but to ask the question, have these been recently vetted? Have you cross-referenced the subscriber names with the names in your database? And it's just asking the question, right? It's not accusing anyone of not doing any work. We just want to know, right? If the offer is up on a website, is that behind a login or a paywall screen so that we can make sure that people are actually logged into their account rather than just finding it online and being able to sign up even if they're not qualified. So that's a really essential part. And then we have tested a number of different tools. We actually had a process where we tested 2 data quality tools as well as a human being with the same list. And all 3 found different problems. So the test did not help. It was exactly the same list, rescreening for the same thing. And so we thought, wow, there's just not a plug and play system, right? There's no tool that's going to do this for us. So let's do human plus tool. So we have a stack of processes that we take and best practices. And I'm happy to send you the link to our white paper so you can put that in the show notes with kind of because it is qualitative and because it is being done by humans, we don't do the same thing every time. We have a list of things that we employ depending on the methodology, the list source, the topic, the incentive amount. There's a number of things that can kind of trigger us to push and pull different levers. So I'm happy to share that with the audience.
Right. That sounds quite complex and also very fascinating. Just to go a little bit deeper, have you found some screening methods or some safeguards that work across different kinds of researchers, specifically to just make sure that the participants are truly being honest?
Yeah, I mean, we do a video articulation screen for every person on every project. And honestly, that has been the best, not only from watching the video to check the validity of the person, but they also drop little clues with their VPN and the email signature. And there's a few digital clues that we can get as they're uploading that video. So it's both to check for the content. We call it an articulation video, right? They don't know that we're doing this for fraud, but it's because we're using it for both purposes. We're making sure they're qualified participants that can talk about the topic in question. And if there's anything suspect in that, it's giving us some digital breadcrumbs to be able to kind of dive in and check it out.
Got it. So if I understand correctly, the video articulation solves for 2 things. One of them is just them being articulate enough to participate in the research, and second, for fraud prevention generally.
And the third thing is that they feel committed already because they've already uploaded this video. So it tends to improve show rates as well. So side benefit.
Nice. That's super interesting. And have you seen, when you ask participants to sort of do this additional step, have you seen the engagement rates drop also?
No, I mean, we've been doing this for so many years. I don't really have anything to match that against. Sometimes when we are working directly with panel samples, so let's say we're coming in as a qualitative partner and the quant survey has already been done and people have opted in, that does affect things because they have started from a place where they're not used to doing that. So we do get some drop off at that point, but that's fine because we know how many people to ask for because we know what that drop looks like. So we'll ask for, let's say it's a qualitative sample, we would ask for 10x the number of people we need. If it's coming direct from panel, we go, 20x, 30x because we know that happens.
God, that makes sense. And do you face some partner resistance as well? So, for instance, when you're selecting the vendors and you have this additional process of qualifying participants, does that sort of hinder the relationship with the vendors?
I mean, I guess it determines who we work with.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. And sort of one thing that we've heard previously is, every time you have to invest a lot more in data quality, you have to also make sure that the brand is equally invested in it. But the problem is that for data quality, it can be quite subjective for even the brand to find out that, the participant quality was not high at the first place itself. So the agencies may more privy to the fact that, probably we're not having the best people participate in the research. So how do you sort of increase the buy-in from the brands to also invest a lot more into making sure that they're getting the best research outputs?
We don't have a lot of issues when we're working directly with brands. Usually they care and they want good quality. A couple years ago, we did transparently start saying, we have to increase our recruiting window by a couple days and increase our price a little bit. And the price went up not only for that time, right, the additional human hours for all the vetting and checking, but also for inflation and a lot of, there were many reasons for that, right? But we didn't get any pushback at all. No one said, can you give us the worst quality? Can you lower your standards, please? Like we didn't hear any of that at all. I think, but the other side of that is when we come in and it is not our project holistically, right? So we're not the only supplier, we're not the only part of research being done, and we catch something. That's harder because they come off of the spreadsheet, they come out of the charts and they become real people. And so we discover some things sometimes, and that is actually a very hard conversation to say, we've stepped in as kind of your finer qualitative bookend and we've noticed these things, but there's no way I wouldn't share that. Like that's part of our responsibility to say, maybe you need like an asterisk or an extra look at the data or something to make sure, because we did notice this. We're not sure at what scale this is happening, but anecdotally, we've come across this in our work and you should be aware.
God, that makes a lot of sense. And do you generally see that there are like kinds of customers who are more conscious about that data quality in the beginning itself? Hence, they may be more receptive to the, let's say, educational efforts from your end, versus there are customers who just would competitively want, the lowest bid and sort of the lowest proposal, which may be both cheaper and faster in terms of delivery, but essentially lower quality.
I don't think we have any of the latter. We don't position ourselves that way. We position ourselves as experts and quality thought partners and leaders. So we don't really have any of the second category, but I would say heightened importance does come from brands who I think, and quite rightly, I actually very much agree with them on this. If the incidence rate is very low and or the incentive is very high, and or they have a really strong typing tool, right? They know their segments, they know their personas, they want these very specific people. I think the awareness is that's difficult. And so you are more likely to get people trying to get into that study and like trying the screener a few different times, trying to answer different questions, especially in B2B work, when those incentives are multiple hundreds of dollars for the hour. That's a system that's worth gaming.
Right.
We've created, a way to make pretty good money. So I think, we're all aware that to just have sort of a heightened focus and a heightened awareness in those situations.
Got it. So you mean like for scenarios wherein there's already enough of, let's say, certain incentives for people to commit greater degree of fraud. Also, the client awareness is higher by default versus the places where it may not matter to the same degree, so the consciousness of like quality is also lower.
I don't think it matters less. I think it always matters. I just think we have conversations about the likelihood of fraud happening. And if you are recruiting, let's say, a general population audience with a couple criteria points who's like a 20% incidence rate, there's less gaming of that system. People are more likely to qualify. Whereas in very specific B2B work, there just aren't that many people that qualify. So sometimes if we get, a wave of screener taking, we get suspect right away. Like, what is going on there? Because they've found out that there's, a study for hairdressers that pays $250 an hour. And so everyone jumps on it, right? Which is different than if you're saying, do you want $75 to come talk to us about toothpaste, right? Like that's just sort of like less potential issue there.
Got it. No, this is super interesting stuff. And in terms of like, do you see people trying to use AI in any way to game these systems, as we just talked about, wherein especially the stakes are higher and you're making a lot of money if you happen to like figure out the right way to crack it? So have you seen some evidence of like fraud happening as a result of AI?
Not well, okay. This is October 7th of 2024. I always feel like time stamping these things, right? Because what I'm about to say is only valid today. We haven't seen that as much as human engineered fraud, meaning we've seen people submit two videos, one with a mask and one without a mask with two different names. We've seen 20 people sit in front of the same background. Like that's they didn't need AI to do those things, right? That's just I think, but what I'm not aware of is some of the tools that may be working on the back end. Like I know there's some companies like Pay for Your Say, right, that are giving these webinars and tutorials about how to get into these things. They could be recommending AI tools. We may not be recognizing them as AI yet. But for instance, as part of the integrity initiative I was telling you about earlier, we intentionally re-recruited 10 participants who we knew to be fraudulent because we were curious to talk to them and see if we could break them, right? And like figure out why and how you're doing this. We sent the email out, and within an hour, we had no, it wasn't even an hour. I think it was 20 minutes. We had over 200 emails back.
Oh,
to a list of 10.
right.
So we had to email the whole batch and say, actually, this was a personal invitation, but I don't know if they used an AI tool to be able to blast that or mimic it, or I don't know. Or that could have just been copy paste to my friend, right? So I don't know if if the proof of AI is evident yet. It's a little bit different, and I'm just going to speak quickly about the data quality of the project because I think it's related. It's similarly hard to tell if they're using AI to quote cheat when doing the research. So what we have started doing is acknowledging that they might, in the same way that they might Google something, right? I mean, it's different tools, same behavior. They don't, and you know, they're either lazy or they don't want to sound stupid or whatever, you know, they're not feeling creative today, whatever the reason. It's not always nefarious, right? So we've started asking kind of a two-tier question, like, please don't Google or ChatGPT this yet. We want to hear your we want to hear your feedback, and then ask it as a second question and say, okay, now go for it. Like now see what the bots say and tell us what you think about the difference. Like, what did you learn? So we're trying to just be a little bit more transparent and acknowledge the behavior. So yeah, that's on the data collection side of things, but I think it's important. There's no 100% perfect clear indicator. And rather than trying to surface that, yeah, we just haven't come into the like a perfect way to surface that yet.
Got it. That makes sense. So, you mean like in terms of impact of AI on participant recruitment, fraud behavior, you've seen generally it's more either systematic in nature, where like let's say you receive that blast of like 200 replies back, so that probably indicates that there's something happening. It may not be like individual actors trying to use AI to like commit fraud because that does not seem super possible as of today, October. Probably like 1 month from now people would have their AI avatars also submitting the
Right.
videos for notification. Yeah, so awesome. And the second part that you mentioned is in terms of the data collection itself. So during that process also you see that it's not necessarily fraudulent behavior which is impacting data quality, but it's just uninterested participants or maybe people who don't have the full knowledge of what they're participating in. Is that fair to say?
I guess I don't know that for sure. We're human behavior experts. That's what we do, right? So I see like a very strong parallel to 2 years ago when there would be a strikingly accurate answer to something and we would say, did you just Google that? Well, yeah, because I didn't know, so I Googled it. So I think that's what I mean is like I think the tools are changing but the behavior is similar.
Interesting. And you mentioned that two-tier system of questioning, which I found very fascinating. Have you seen some impact in terms of participant engagement as a result of, let's say, adding a disclaimer to every question? Like, how does it impact?
Honestly, we don't do it to every question. So it's just, the ones where we really want them to think. There's certain reporting behavior. There's very little reason or need to AI anything, right? Like what you had for breakfast this morning. Like, why would you use it? Just tell me what you had for breakfast. That's fine. But if it's for instance, we were dealing with a financial service product last week, and it's a confusing one. And so one of the questions is, to your best knowledge, how does this work? And we know that not many people know how it works, right? So if I was a human being getting that question and wanted to sound smart or get the question right, I may ask GPT or I may ask Google, right? And so I think it was more about preempting that question could cause people to do that. We're not going to ask them like, who do you bank with? We're not going to say, please don't check with ChatGPT, because they should know who they bank with. But the follow-up question of, do you have this product? And to your knowledge, how does this work? That's the one where we're going to kind of acknowledge what might happen and say, please don't do this. We really want to know what you think before we find out the right answer. And we'll all talk about the right answer once we figure it out, but we're not quite there yet. But we haven't noticed any participation differences.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think till now we've talked about AI in the pejorative sense for data quality. Are there any scenarios where you see it having a positive impact as well? To give you an example, when I think about like participant engagement during the data collection process itself, is there a way that we can get participants to talk a little bit more about what we'd want them to share, data on, right? So how do we sort of customize and personalize those experiences to make them talk more often, like something like that?
Oh, well, I think that's not where my mind went to first, but we'll get there. On that note, I mean, I think using all the open, non-research specific tools to help researchers ask better questions is definitely a good use of AI, right? You don't need a research specific tool to say, I'm going to talk about this really complicated financial product. What on earth is it? And how would I ask people questions about it? And who's likely to have this type of project? Like, I think just from a researcher interacting to know more about the subject and to be able to kind of get more creative or more fine-tuned with their questions, AI is a great tool for that, right? And so if we're asking better questions, that enables participants to give us better information. So that's one piece. I think the other full fleet of research-specific AI-driven analysis tools are a very good thing. It's a flood right now of options. We've tested many over the past year and a half. There's definitely going to be some gold standard products eventually from that side of things to help researchers do better analysis. I think not that we are not fantastic researchers that do great analysis, but I think what it's going to help with is bias elimination. Sometimes you're in your analysis, but you're the human being who's been in the research, and so you just can't separate it quite that much. So we're kind of using some of these tools as a second person in the room to say, you've seen all the data, what do you think, right? To make sure that you're kind of checking yourself, and just ability to, as everybody said, speed things up, find clips faster, all of that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, it helps the input of the research process be better phrased, and it helps the analysis be sort of better weighted, or you know what I'm saying? Like just to double check to make sure that that we are not getting in the way of the data.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating how you talk about like AI's role actually being extremely metacognitive in that sense. So not saying, it's able to ask one question at a time. You're essentially saying, no, that's what sort of a researcher is good at. What an AI is good at is like, once I've asked 10 questions to really figure out, hey, is it seeming like I have a bias when I'm doing that? So it's way more meta in nature than sort of, being able to do that one task at a time.
Yeah, for instance, every day of research, no matter what the methodology is, we send a very quick recap email. So it's like a daily summary to our client team, just saying, here's what happened on October 7th. We talked to these people. This is basically what they're saying. It's just in case if someone didn't get a chance to join live. Well, it's really interesting to feed that through a platform and say, give me your recap of the day to the platform, right? And then not looking at it while you write your own. And then looking, right? And saying, oh, interesting. Like, yep, got it. Oh, I forgot about that. And in the same way, got it. Oh, you don't know the client as much as I do. That's not important, right? So it's going to get some things right and add, and it's going to show some things that are irrelevant. But I think kind of just having those two voices is
Yeah.
helpful in that moment.
That's a very interesting use case of like using AI like that. I've heard for the first time. Do you have like any other outlier examples of where you saw that it significantly improved your workflow or productivity today?
I mean, honestly, a lot of the AI tools that are helping us are on the deliverables side of things. So we use a lot of audio and visual elements to our reporting. We have podcast reports, we have video sizzle reels, we have like all of these types of non-slide based reporting. And so we've been using a lot of AI driven tools to help with that side of things. So they're not even research tools, right? They're just some like great, marketing video production tools that we've got a stack now of to help turn those things around faster and be snazzier and incorporate our branding and all of that stuff. So that's been a big help. Yeah, and I think the other thing that's helping from some of the research specific tools and platforms is that our team can be there in there together. So if there is kind of a hub of the project and we have multiple researchers on the project, I think it really helps people say, oh, did you check, or what did it say? Or I'll look at this bit, you look at this bit, and then you can see my, tags or notes or highlights in the platform as we're working together.
Got it. So more on the collaboration and delivery sides than actual data collection and recruitment is what I hear.
Yeah.
Got it. That's fascinating. So just sort of one last question. In fact, it has two parts. One, I'd love to hear your maybe the favorite fraud story. So the most fascinating example of like how creative people can get when they're trying to like game the system. Because I think inspirations for great tools come from the same places. I think you mentioned like re-interviewing the people who committed fraud. So I'd love to hear like some cool stories from that. And second, some resources that you find extremely useful as a researcher yourself to sort of keep up with the changing nature of fraud and also the tools in the industry.
Okay, so you might have to remind me of the second question, but the first question, the fraud stories, again, I am going to send this white paper through that logs a few of them, but really, I have to call out Shira Glickman on our team who put her hand up and said, I will break them. And she couldn't. They're really good. They're really good. So we had moments where we were saying, oh, I see you're, calling in from Portland, Oregon today. How's the weather? And they said, beautiful. And right, we have our Google Weather app and it's like thunderstorms, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see you very well. Do you mind just opening the window shade? Oh, no, it's broken. It's locked. I can't open that window, to see what the weather's like outside. Yeah. Like, oh, I noticed from your VPN today that you're in New York, but when you filled out the screener, you said you were based in Los Angeles. Yeah, I'm visiting my brother. Like so fast with the questions. Oh, my other favorite is a lot of the time when we're like in the interview and trying to figure out, because we don't want to do any kind of like profiling or cut somebody off before we search. So we really try to ask them a few questions to make sure like, I don't want to make this call, without being 100% sure. So we'll say, oh, you're studying at such and such. What's your major? And they will say the first major that's on the website for that school. So they always start with an A, which is interesting. But, things like that. So I think they're not especially fun stories taken, in aggregate, but it is, I think that's what's tricky about AI when you think about it, because of a lot of things we've discovered because we are humans and because we can tell that another human is trying to pull one over on this human. And so I think that's, that's kind of the next step of AI or fraud detection and things like that is kind of how do you figure out from a like empathetic, observant way. And again, we're trying to limit that as much as possible. So we try to have as many objective checks. So the stories I'm telling you are really about people that make it through all of those. And then, we're doing that more human subjective check. So I'm trying to limit that as much as possible. We want less stories. I want less fun stories. But yeah, from an information source standpoint, I mean, I think a lot of the organizations in our industry are really stepping up and are really providing some good tools and being very vigilant. So the Data Integrity Initiative is now part of the IDEA Council, and they're kind of doing like a two-sided coin about participant experience and data quality, because the very good point is that we don't want to do so much for data quality you asked a question about this before that would kind of annoy really good participants who are real and want to participate in the studies. So they're trying to kind of approach it from two angles to make sure that we're improving the experience and checking for quality. The case group is doing a lot of work as well. There's a lot of brand side researchers in the case project who are looking at this kind of from their angle. And I think that's very smart as well, because nobody wants to make a business decision that's based on fraudulent responses. So so they're doing some great work. I know SMR has put out a toolkit and are really being thought leaders in that space. So yeah, I mean, I think we are all rightfully concerned, and I'm really glad that there is a collaborative approach, and a lot of these organizations are working together to make sure that there is a good meeting of the minds and a good way forward that is collaborative on all of this.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciated you taking out the time today. I had a wonderful conversation. Hope you had a good time as well. We'd love to follow No Research more, so we'll drop the link in the show notes as well. And would love to see more people talk about data quality and AI in this space. Thank you.